Well, welcome back to All Day Live. It's a really shocking headline if you've seen it at all this summer. The one I read was 18 children and teens missing in North Dakota since the beginning of this year. And many of them are from indigenous communities. Joining me now is Prairie Rose Seminole, an advocate for missing and murdered indigenous people. Also, she is I hope I say this correctly, you'll have to correct me, Arikara. Oh, thank you. Well, can you just say it for us?
Yeah, I'm Arikara, Northern Cheyenne, Dakota, and I'm from Western North Dakota. I'm a brief introduction. I'm also a filmmaker. My recent short is around the missing, murdered Indigenous relatives crisis. And so when you're doing research for documentaries, you kind of become somewhat of an expert.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the filmmaking that you've done here in your documentary. I think just at first glance, when people are seeing these headlines, and I know NPR has done things, on this as well, but we see these and the numbers just jump out at you, and it's very shocking. I did just check North Dakota, the Attorney General's website, and it looks like there are 11 missing people, but I've been watching it for a few weeks, and it seems like the numbers kind of fluctuate, where some are located, but then others go missing. Do you have a feel for what's happening with the numbers and what's going on?
Yeah, thank you for covering this subject too. I know Minnesota's been dealing with their own crisis, so my heart goes out to a lot of the families in mourning and those living in fear, and the hope around community coming together and building a world we all can live in, right? And that includes the safety of our children. And in North Dakota, the reality of our missing young people, it's a flowing dynamic around those who do return, those who end up getting caught and going into our justice system or foster care systems. And then we have young people who don't meet the definition of youth when it comes to missing people. So youth is those who do fit the definition of being under the age of 18. And so we have a lot of those missing individuals who are kind of falling through the cracks of the system, and the public being notified about the disappearance. And so, like Renzo Bullhead, who's been missing for the last few months out of the Bismarck-Mandan area of North Dakota, is 20 years old. And so they don't fit the definition of a missing person. What we're finding here is that our alert system has some strict definitions where people are falling through the cracks. So,
and could you actually elaborate a little bit more on this feather alert? Because this is not something that I believe we have here in Minnesota. Explain, you're trying to, I think, explain a little bit about some of the parameters of it and how limiting it might be. What is it, and what would make it better, do you think?
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, the alert systems here in North Dakota and across the country, we're trying to expand that threshold of the alert systems, right? So we have something like the Amber Alert, which is found across the country, that is only triggered under very certain specific circumstances around a confirmed abduction of a youth, right? And what we did in North Dakota is create the Feather Alert, which became active August 1st, where again it's an endangered missing alert that goes out for indigenous young people. However, it's really similar to the Amber Alert, in which it's only triggered in a confirmed abduction, which is difficult because many young people or even indigenous youth don't fit that definition, even though they're possibly in real danger. So Feather Alert, Amber Alert, we have something also called the Silver Alert, which is for adults who are vulnerable, who go missing. There are some narrow legal definitions, and people who go missing don't fit that box. And so the goal isn't to overwhelm people with alert systems. It's to make sure that every missing person has the fastest possible chance of being found. And so these alerts are a tool, and together with public notification and law enforcement engagement, they create a safety net. And without them, our children and relatives will continue to go unseen.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk about the term runaway. I think for a lot of us of a certain generation, we think back to when we were kids, runaway meant something, and it usually wasn't that big of a deal. We live in a very different time now. So how does law enforcement handle runaways? Are they looking at it seriously enough, do you think?
I feel like the runaway definition will allow young people and adults to just fall through the crack. And so right now our missing systems don't include youth who have run away, only youth who meet the definition of being abducted, right? And so just because a young person has run away doesn't mean that they're safe. It doesn't mean that they're not in danger. And so when it comes to these alert systems or the public getting involved, we need tools that alert families and communities to respond accordingly. And so law enforcement doesn't include runaways in the numbers of missing youth, in the numbers for missing youth in North Dakota. So it just points to that need of expanding the threshold for the alert systems, but also needing stronger coordination. And so that tribal, state, federal systems are all communicating and responding quickly when it comes to our missing people.
Yeah. We talk about the specific challenges for Indigenous teens and children in this space, and I wanted to ask you specifically about some of those dangers. But I'm just looking here. So since August, 2/3 of children in South Dakota and Montana who are missing are enrolled tribal members. In North Dakota, 1/3 of the children currently listed are missing as Indigenous. So clearly, this is affecting the Indigenous community far greater than any other. What are you most worried about with these teens and children who are out there?
And the same goes for missing youth in Minnesota too, right? Like the longer we wait to trigger not only an alert system but a community response, the likelihood of finding our young people safe diminishes, right? And so, yeah, the idea that more than half or 2/3 of the missing young people are Indigenous, I hope that it gets people's attention, but it's not random, right?
Yeah.
It reflects a deeper crisis, whether it's systemic failures that leave Indigenous young people more vulnerable or the slow response when they go missing. And so what I want people to really understand is that we can't accept that as normal. Any child who goes missing deserves urgency, they deserve community response and systems that prevent kids from going missing in the first place, right? And I'm not laying the blame on law enforcement, but we do have a reality in rural areas, whether that's rural North Dakota, rural Montana, rural South Dakota, rural Minnesota, that systems often default to kind of a slow response. Well, they ran away, or they're with friends. Oh, they just took off, or somehow diminishing the safety of a young person who goes missing. And so we do need those tools that allow us to treat every missing person with that sense of urgency.
Yeah, and that occurred to me as I was reading all the statistics in here and just seeing, how many more were coming from the Indigenous communities, because the more you hear about it and the more it gets ingrained in your brain that, oh, this is what happens in that community. And then you just stop, you normalize it and you think, well, but each one of these is a child or, a teenager. So I think that's a really important point. Trying to figure out here in Minnesota, we have these statistics from North Dakota and from South Dakota, and a lot of people have been writing about it and talking about it in the news. But Minnesota was a lot harder. And it's my understanding there's really not kind of a centralized database for missing children. I mean, what is working, do you think? What things could Minnesota do? I know just recently we have the missing murdered and missing Indigenous people office. There's a state office now, which is a step in that direction. Are there other things that you're seeing that are working that you want to see in other places?
Yeah, I think establishing the offices is a good first step. North Dakota just created a task force, right? And we're seeing that trend across the country, where task force that are funded through state legislation, supported through state legislation and also supported through state funding, are created to help coordinate those efforts, right? That helps to address the underreporting, any jurisdictional confusion, those slow responses, and now putting in place some type of an alert system, but also creating a centralized database. And so Minnesota really kind of led recently in the last few years with creating the task force, but also, or the office, excuse me, which is also funded by the license plates, by the way. So if you get the plates for missing murdered indigenous relatives, that goes to help fund this office. It's a mechanism in place that at least builds awareness, and I think that's the first step, is that awareness piece, the recognize like, hey, we don't have all the tools necessary to respond to these types of crises when indigenous people go missing, or oftentimes, like in North Dakota, when we move forward with legislation to create a missing and murdered indigenous persons database, we didn't have one for missing people in general. So that's where we started, right? So something that affects one part of our demographic hopefully improves addressing the crisis, or situations for all of those of us in the state.
Yeah.
So the establishing of the advocacy piece from the legislative actions helps, but the jurisdiction pieces also is a huge barrier to responding to the needs of those who live on the reservation. Now, the simplest way I can put this is say your house is burning down. Now, if you call 911 to get the fire department and they ask, well, is it a native person's house or is it a non-native person's house, right? Should that be an issue? To me, it shouldn't be an issue, but we have those jurisdictional issues when it comes to crime or crises on the reservation. And so we need law enforcement agencies to really put together a coordinated effort to respond, whether or not the missing person or even the perpetrator of a violent crime is native or non-native. And so those are efforts that can get super complicated in brief segments like this. So I don't want to get us too confused.
No,
but the jurisdictional barriers is an issue.
We could listen to you talk all hour, and here's what I would like to do, because I know we are running out of a little time here, but what I would like to do is I want to just briefly mention the documentary that you've been working on, and I also want to have you back on, if you can, in the next couple of weeks even, to do another segment just on the documentary. And then I would love to stay in touch with you and continue to talk about this, because there are a lot of different roads that we could go down and spend a lot of time talking about. So if that's okay with you, let's mention your documentary and tell us about it and where we can find it.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a short documentary on the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives crisis through the lens of these badass Indigenous women motorcyclists. And it allows us to have a point of entry to understanding the crisis from a different lens, and something that draws people's attention, like motorcycle culture. And it's called We Ride for Her. And WeRideForHer.org is our website. We Ride for Her is our social media handles. And it's also available to stream on the WaterBear network. So if you go to waterbear.com and sign up for a free profile, you can screen the short documentary. And it's really a point of entry around awareness on the crisis of missing murdered Indigenous relatives. We're actually in the process now of shooting our feature documentary on the crisis through the lens of these motorcycle women who allow us into their lives, and we've built this relationship. And that's one thing with the short, is that you can't go deep into the lives in the work of responding to this need. And I hope what the short does for audiences is, one, introduce you to this crisis, but two, gives you a point of entry to get involved, whether that's advocacy work, sharing missing and murdered posters from social media, or who you vote for really matters, right? Like, for those of us who live on reservations, like I do in Western North Dakota, my community in White Shield, North Dakota, it will literally take an act of Congress to mitigate some of our safety needs, right? To get law enforcement to truly really work together, whether that's our nation working and leveraging our sovereignty to work with local law enforcement, which my tribe has done, to mitigate some of our safety concerns, like de-escalating a violent situation, or responding to high-speed chase into our communities, right? Like, so there's things like that, but that is not a catch-all system. But I hope folks go out and watch the documentary and fall in love with these women, just like I have, in a way of, this is our community, this is our sisterhood. Motorcycle culture is a means to address a need that allows us to respond to violence in our communities, and how these women have done that, and how motorcycle culture across the country has really changed and shifted from one that you look at this white male patriarchal violent culture to one that's actually growing in diversity and responding to those violent situations and creating safety nets for our communities. So I'm super proud of the film, and I could talk about it all day.
And I want to talk more about it. So after this, I will email you and we will figure out a time for you to come back on very soon to talk about that. But also, like I said, I think you're a great resource for us to just bring some more awareness. And if that's all we can do here, then I think that's something, and that's better than nothing. So
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
agree. Thank you.
All right, Prairie Rose Seminole, we are grateful for your time, and we'll talk to you very soon.